Hey there, and welcome to Dark Creaky TV. If you're new, hit that subscribe button for spine-tingling Reddit creepypasta stories that are perfect for a night of chilling thrills. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and let's get into tonight's stories. The Ouija board gave me a warning about my boyfriend. I should have listened. Hey Reddit. So, I never thought I'd be one of those people posting about paranormal stuff, but here I am. I don't even know if I believe in any of this, but I figured you guys might have some insight because, honestly, I'm kind of losing it. Okay, let me back up a little. My name's Jess, and I live in a small, boring town where the most exciting thing that happens is the occasional high school football game. So, yeah. My friends and I are always on the lookout for something to kill time. This story starts a couple of months ago when my friend Lily suggested we mess around with a Ouija board one night. You know, just for laughs. Classic slumber party cliche, right? It was me, Lily, and my boyfriend Ethan. We'd been together for about 6 months at that point. Ethan isn't exactly bad, he's just kind of hard to read. Sometimes he's sweet, sometimes he shuts down completely. Like there's this side of him I can't reach. I know everyone has secrets, but with Ethan, it always felt like there was more going on under the surface, something just out of sight. But I didn't push him about it. I thought I'd learn more about him as time went on. Spoiler, I did, but not the way I expected. Anyway, we were bored out of our minds that night, and Lily had this old Ouija board her mum kept from the 90s. It had that weird yellowed plastic planchette and warped cardboard that smelled faintly of attic dust. Ethan rolled his eyes when she pulled it out, but I was kind of curious. I'd never done a Ouija board before, always thought it was just a bunch of nonsense. We sat down in Lily's room, lights off except for the glow of her lava lamp, which made the whole thing feel even more ridiculous. Ethan was scrolling on his phone, half listening while Lily gave us a dramatic introduction like she was hosting a spooky YouTube channel. You know the type. Do not take your hands off the planchette and always say goodbye. Stuff like that. We were giggling through it, treating the whole thing like a joke. Lily started by asking the usual goofy questions like, "Is anyone here with us?" The planchette didn't move at first. Ethan kept muttering under his breath that this was dumb, but eventually, after what felt like forever, the planchette barely slid to yes. Now, we all accused each other of moving it, of course. I mean, someone had to be pushing it, right? But Lily swore it wasn't her, and I know I wasn't doing it. Ethan just sat there, smirking like he wasn't buying any of it. I wanted to drop it, but there was this weird vibe in the room. You ever feel like you're being watched, but there's no one there? It was like that. Just heavy, suffocating silence. Like the air was pressing in on us. We kept going anyway, mostly because Lily wouldn't let it go. She was way more into it than I was. She asked the board stupid questions like, "How old are you?" and "What's your name?" The answers were slow, jumbled, and didn't really make sense, like a scrambled word puzzle. But then, when it spelled out 28, Lily looked at Ethan and laughed. "Ooh, your future self is coming to visit." That's when I made the mistake that I can't stop thinking about. For some reason, I blurted out, "What do you know about Ethan?" The planchette froze under our fingers. Lily shot me a weird look, but I just shrugged. I didn't mean anything by it. It was just one of those random thoughts that popped into my head. Ethan didn't seem mad, but his smile faded. And then the board answered. It spelled out R-U-N. At first we laughed, thinking it was some glitchy joke. I was ready to brush it off. Maybe Lily was messing with us. But her face told a different story. She looked genuinely creeped out, and I know for a fact I wasn't moving that planchette. Ethan just leaned back, arms crossed, staring at the board like it was personally insulting him. "All right, real funny," he said, his voice low and tight. "Which one of you is doing that?" Neither of us answered, because it wasn't a joke. I could feel that deep in my gut. This was something else. The kind of heavy, sticky feeling that crawls into your bones and doesn't leave. Before Lily or I could say anything, Ethan suddenly got up and grabbed his stuff. "I'm out," he said. He was pissed. Like, more than made sense. "This is stupid." He stormed out of the room without even saying goodbye. Lily tried to laugh it off, saying, "Wow, someone's got a fragile ego." But I couldn't stop thinking about what the board had said. Run. After Ethan left, the mood in the room got heavier, like we'd stirred up something we shouldn't have. Lily and I tried to close the session properly. We said goodbye, moved the planchette to goodbye, and even put the board back in its box. But I couldn't shake that weird, gnawing feeling. I told myself it was just my imagination, but something about Ethan's reaction stuck with me. He was always calm, always collected. That was the first time I'd ever seen him genuinely rattled. And I kept wondering, what if the board wasn't a joke? What if it was a warning? I went to bed that night feeling off, like I was forgetting something important, something I couldn't put my finger on. I texted Ethan to see if he made it home okay, but he didn't respond. That was weird too. He always texted back, even if it was just a quick yeah or good night. I tossed and turned for hours, my brain replaying the whole thing over and over. The word run kept flashing in my mind like a neon sign I couldn't turn off. I didn't even believe in this stuff, but the vibe was so wrong. Around 3 a.m, my phone finally buzzed. It was a text from Ethan, but it wasn't what I expected. It just said, "You shouldn't have asked that." That's when I knew something was really, really wrong. Okay, that's it for now, guys. I'll post part 2 soon. I need to collect my thoughts a bit before diving into what happened next. Things only got weirder from here, and honestly, writing this out is creeping me out all over again. But I need to get this off my chest. If you've got any thoughts, I'm all ears. I seriously don't know what to think anymore. After that text, I didn't sleep a single minute. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling while my heart raced. What the hell did Ethan mean by that? The words kept playing over and over in my mind. You shouldn't have asked that. It wasn't just the words that freaked me out. It was the tone, cold, detached. It didn't feel like a text from someone I knew. By morning, I still hadn't heard from him. No follow-up, no explanation, just radio silence. I wanted to text again, but something stopped me, like I was scared to poke at whatever I'd uncovered the night before. Instead, I tried to distract myself, went downstairs, made some coffee, scrolled through TikTok mindlessly. Then my phone buzzed. I jumped, expecting another message from Ethan, but it was Lily this time. She sent me a bunch of and asked if I'd heard from him. Apparently, she'd texted him too, just to make sure he was okay, and she didn't get a response either. That wasn't normal for him at all. Something was wrong. Really wrong. I could feel it. But instead of telling Lily everything, I just said I hadn't heard from him either. No reason to drag her into whatever this was. At least, that's what I told myself. After pacing around my room for a bit, I decided to go over to Ethan's place. He lived with a couple of roommates, and I figured maybe he just crashed after storming out the night before. Maybe I was overthinking everything, and he was just being weird. When I pulled up to his house, the first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. Like, too quiet. Usually his roommates were loud as hell, always playing music or yelling at each other over video games. But today, not a sound. I knocked on the door. No answer. I tried again, harder this time. Still nothing. My stomach twisted, that uneasy feeling growing stronger with every second. I stood there for a minute, debating whether to just leave, but something in the back of my mind wouldn't let me go. So I tried the doorknob. It was unlocked. I stepped inside, and immediately I knew something was off. The place looked normal, no mess, nothing out of place, but it felt empty, like the whole house was holding its breath. I called out Ethan's name, but no one answered. As I walked further in, I noticed something weird on the dining table. Ethan's laptop was sitting there, wide open. That was strange because Ethan was super protective of his stuff. He'd never leave his laptop lying around, especially not unlocked. Curiosity got the better of me, so I leaned in to take a look. The screen was frozen on a web page, something deep in the browser. It wasn't a normal website. It looked like one of those old-school forums from the early 2000s. The background was black, with neon green text and weird pixelated graphics. At the top of the page, in blocky, flashing letters, it said, "Follow the thread." I scrolled down a little, just to see what it was about. The posts were unsettling. A bunch of cryptic messages, almost like they were written in code. But some of them made sense, or at least enough to send a chill down my spine. One post said, "They always show their true face eventually." Another read, "If you ask the wrong question, they come for you." And the one that made my blood run cold. Run. My heart started pounding in my chest. This couldn't be a coincidence, right? The same message from the Ouija board. The same warning. I had no idea what this forum was or how Ethan even found it, but it was bad. I knew that much. Then I heard it. A soft creak from the hallway behind me. I froze, every hair on the back of my neck standing up. Slowly, I turned around, and that's when I saw him, Ethan, standing at the end of the hallway, just watching me. There was something wrong about him. He looked the same, but there was this eerie stillness to him, like he was a wax figure of himself. His eyes were wide, too wide, and his lips were stretched into a smile that didn't reach them. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was something else. Something I didn't recognize. "Hey, Jess," he said, voice low and syrupy. "What are you doing here?" I tried to play it cool, even though my insides felt like they were turning to mush. I just came to check on you. You didn't answer my texts." He took a step closer, and I swear to God, it felt like the temperature in the room dropped. "Sorry about that," he said, still smiling that awful smile. "I've been busy." His voice was so calm, too calm, like he was rehearsing the words instead of saying them naturally. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to leave, to get the hell out of there, but I was rooted in place. Then he tilted his head, just slightly, and said something that made my blood freeze. "You shouldn't have asked that question." It wasn't just the words, it was the way he said them, like he wasn't talking about the Ouija board anymore. I don't even remember how I managed to respond. I think I mumbled something about needing to go, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from him. The way he was looking at me, it was like he was seeing right through me, like I was a puzzle he was trying to figure out. He didn't stop me when I turned and practically ran out of the house. I made it to my car, heart hammering in my chest, and sped out of there without looking back. When I got home, I locked all the doors and windows, double-checking everything. I knew it didn't make sense. Ethan wasn't some kind of monster that could sneak into my house. But still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I tried calling him later that night, just to convince myself that I was overreacting. But his phone went straight to voicemail. I texted Lily too, but she said she hadn't heard from him since that weird Ouija board session. She tried to laugh it off, saying maybe he was just ghosting us because he was embarrassed. But I knew better. Something wasn't right. Then, just before I went to bed, I got a notification on my phone. A message. From Ethan. It was a photo. My heart dropped into my stomach when I opened it. It was a picture of me, standing at his front door earlier that day, just before I went inside. I didn't even notice him taking it. And underneath the photo, there was a single message. "I told you not to ask." I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my bed, phone in hand, staring at the photo Ethan had sent. I kept zooming in, hoping to find something, anything, that would make this make sense. But no, it was me, standing on his doorstep earlier that day, completely unaware, with that same unsettling stillness to the shot. That photo proved two things. One, Ethan knew exactly what I was doing, and 2, he had been watching me the whole time. The thing that really messed me up, though, the timestamp. The photo was sent 5 minutes before I knocked on his door. There was no way that was possible. By 4 a.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I had this overwhelming sense that something was unraveling, and I needed answers. Part of me wanted to block his number, delete the photo, and pretend none of this had happened. But I knew deep down that it wasn't over. Ignoring it wouldn't make it go away. I could feel that in my bones. I needed to figure out what Ethan was hiding and why the Ouija board told me to run. The next day, I decided to do something a little crazy. I know this sounds like the dumbest horror movie move ever, but I needed to know what was on that weird forum I saw on Ethan's laptop. Something told me that if I could trace it back, I might understand what the hell was happening to him, or at least get some clue about what I'd stepped into. The thing is, that forum wasn't something you just find on Google. It had that deep web vibe, hidden away from the public, meant for people who know where to look. I didn't know how to access that stuff, but I did know someone who did. Lily had a cousin named Ben who was into, let's just say, sketchy tech stuff. He was that guy, hacker vibes, always talking about VPNs and encryption like it was his personal religion. I hated the idea of dragging him into this, but I didn't have many options. When I called him and explained what I'd seen on Ethan's laptop, Ben was weirdly quiet for a minute. Then he just said, "Yeah, I can help, but you need to be careful. If this site's what I think it is, you shouldn't mess with it." That made my stomach drop. "What do you mean?" I asked. Ben sighed. "There's this kind of site, deep web message boards, old school stuff. It's not like Reddit or Facebook. It's different. People share things there that aren't meant for the surface web. I've heard about threads that aren't just weird. They're cursed, like the information itself infects anyone who reads it. It's usually harmless, just creepy nonsense. But sometimes, people get obsessed." He paused, like he was debating whether to tell me the rest. "And sometimes," he finally added, "the stuff people talk about on those threads, it starts to bleed into real life." That was all I needed to hear. My stomach twisted, but I told him I needed access anyway. Ben groaned, but eventually sent me a link to download some browser that could access hidden sites. He told me to proceed at my own risk, if only I'd listened. Later that night, I sat at my desk with the lights off, the glow of my computer screen the only thing illuminating my room. My hands were shaking as I followed Ben's instructions, accessing the deep web for the first time. It felt like stepping into another world, a world I wasn't supposed to see. The site was exactly how I remembered it from Ethan's laptop. Black background, neon green text, pixelated graphics that hurt my eyes to look at. At the top of the page, those same flashing words blinked in slow, eerie rhythm. "Follow the thread." I scrolled down, and the posts hit me like a punch to the gut. The first thing I saw was the word "run," again, in all caps, as if it were screaming at me. There were dozens of posts, all scrambled and cryptic, but there were patterns if you looked close enough. People were talking about someone, or something, called the Watcher. Most of the posts were warnings. If he picks you, it's already too late. Don't trust the ones closest to you. You'll know him by his smile. The deeper I scrolled, the more my head started to spin. It was like these people were describing Ethan, or at least something that had taken his place. The way they talked about the Watcher, it wasn't a person. It was a thing, wearing the face of someone you loved. It feeds on questions, on curiosity. The more you try to figure it out, the closer it gets. I clicked on one of the older threads, hoping to find some way to stop it, to understand what I was dealing with. The post was long, rambling, but one part stood out. "If you see it smile, it already knows everything about you." My heart dropped. Ethan's smile, the one that didn't reach his eyes, the one he gave me in the hallway. As I kept reading, The air in my room grew heavy. It felt like someone was standing right behind me, watching over my shoulder. My skin prickled, but I was too afraid to turn around. The posts had warned about that too. Never look behind you while reading. I wanted to stop, to shut the laptop and pretend I'd never found any of this. But I couldn't. I had to know how it ended. At the very bottom of the thread, there was one final post. It wasn't like the others. No warnings, no cryptic messages. Just a single sentence. "He's already inside." I slammed the laptop shut, heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. The room was dead silent, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. And then I heard it, a soft tap, tap, tap on my bedroom window. I froze, every muscle in my body locking up. My bedroom is on the second floor. There's no way anyone could be out there. No way. But the tapping continued, slow, deliberate, like whoever was on the other side knew I was too scared to move. I forced myself to look, and my stomach dropped into my feet. There, on the other side of the glass, was Ethan. His face was pale, pressed against the window pane. And that smile, God, that smile was stretched wide across his face just like before. Too wide, too perfect. It wasn't human. He raised one hand, tapping again with his fingernail. Tap, 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 like a metronome. His eyes never left mine. And then he mouthed the words, "Let me in." I couldn't move. I sat there, frozen, staring at Ethan, or at least what looked like Ethan, tapping softly on my window, the glass fogging with every breath he exhaled. His smile never wavered. It stayed plastered across his face, like he was holding it there with invisible strings. My whole body was screaming at me to run, to get out of the room, but my legs refused to move. I kept telling myself it wasn't real, that this was a nightmare, that I'd wake up any second. But the tapping, the slow, deliberate tap, 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 ground me into reality. I don't know how long I sat there staring at him. It felt like hours. I kept hoping he'd just disappear, that if I didn't acknowledge him, he'd lose interest and leave. But then he did something that made my stomach churn. He tilted his head, just a little, like he was trying to understand me. Then he whispered through the glass, barely audible, "You left the window unlocked." I swear my heart stopped. I shot up from the chair so fast that it tipped over, crashing to the floor. Without thinking, I lunged toward the window and yanked it shut as hard as I could, locking the latch with trembling fingers. Ethan's face didn't change. He just kept smiling, his lips pressed tight, like he knew something I didn't. That's when he whispered again, his words barely visible through the fog on the glass. Too late. And then he was gone. He didn't walk away. He didn't climb down. He just vanished into the night, like he was never there in the first place. I stumbled back, heart pounding so loud I thought it might shatter my ribs. I should have felt relief, but I didn't. Because if what the posts said were true, if this thing wasn't Ethan but something else wearing his face, then it could come back. Any time, anywhere. And the worst part? It was already inside. I locked my bedroom door after that. Every door, every window in the house. I tried calling Lily again, but it went straight to voicemail. I even texted Ben, asking if he knew more about those threads, but he hadn't answered either. I was alone. Every noise made me jump, the hum of the fridge, the creak of the floorboards, the wind brushing against the windows. It all sounded like footsteps, like breathing, like something moving just out of sight. I curled up on my bed, blanket wrapped around me like a shield, and tried not to panic. And then my phone buzzed. I flinched so hard I almost dropped it. My hands were shaking as I picked it up and checked the notification. It was another message, from Ethan's number. This one wasn't a photo. It was a voice recording. I stared at it, my thumb hovering over the play button. Every instinct told me not to listen, but some sick part of me needed to know. I needed to hear it, to understand what I was dealing with. I hit play. At first it was just static, like an old TV tuned to the wrong channel. I thought maybe it was a glitch, but then the static faded, and I heard something underneath it. Breathing. Slow, deep, deliberate. And then Ethan's voice. Jess. It wasn't quite his voice, though. It sounded distant, like he was speaking from the bottom of a well, muffled and distorted. Jess, let me in. I know you're scared, but it's me. I promise, it's me. His tone was soft, almost pleading, but there was something off about it, like he was reading from a script, reciting lines he didn't quite understand. You don't have to be afraid, the voice continued. We can make this right. Just open the door. And then, for the briefest second, the static cut out completely. In that moment, I heard something that made my blood run cold. It wasn't just Ethan's voice in the recording. There was another voice underneath it, barely audible but unmistakable. A low, guttural whisper, threading through his words like a parasite. Let me in. The recording ended with a sharp click, like the sound of a door slamming shut. My whole body went numb. I knew, with every fibre of my being, that whatever was on the other side of that message, it wasn't Ethan. I stared at my phone, heart racing, trying to think of what to do next. And then, before I could stop myself, I texted back, "What are you?" I regretted it the second I hit send, but it was too late. The message went through. I watched the little dots appear, signaling that he, or it, was typing a reply. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. Then the reply came through. Open the door and I'll show you. I jumped out of bed, every nerve in my body screaming. I knew I couldn't stay here. I had to get out, find somewhere safe, anywhere but here. I grabbed my hoodie, shoved my feet into my shoes, and threw open my bedroom door, and stopped dead in my tracks. The hallway was dark, but I could see him standing at the far end, illuminated by the faint glow of the streetlight outside. Ethan, or whatever was left of him. He wasn't moving, just standing there, perfectly still, with that same awful smile stretched across his face. His head tilted at that same unnatural angle. I backed into my room, slamming the door shut and locking it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the lock in place. I pressed my back against the door, heart pounding, and tried to think. There had to be a way out of this. There had to be. Then I heard it, the sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming down the hall. They stopped right outside my door, tap, tap, tap. He was knocking now, not pounding, not demanding, just that same slow, patient tap, like he knew I couldn't run forever. And then, in a voice that was almost a whisper, he said, "Jess, why are you hiding? Don't you trust me?" I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing my hands over my ears. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But the knocking continued, soft and steady. "Come on, Jess," he whispered through the door. "Just open up. We can talk about this." I don't know how long I sat there, heart hammering in my chest, but eventually the knocking stopped. The silence that followed was worse, much worse, because in that silence I realized something horrifying. The door to my bedroom, the one I had locked just minutes ago, was now unlocked, and slowly, quietly, the handle began to turn. The door handle turned slowly, the click of the lock disengaging so soft it felt intentional, like whoever, or whatever was on the other side, wanted me to hear every second of it. My breath caught in my throat. I had locked that door. I know I locked it. And now it was opening. The door creaked open a few inches, just enough for the darkness of the hallway to spill into the room. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. I kept waiting for him to step inside, for that awful, stretched-out smile to slip through the gap. But nothing came. The door just stayed there, cracked open, like an invitation. And that's when I realized, whatever was out there wasn't trying to break in. It wanted me to come to it. The thing about fear, it does weird things to you. It twists your thoughts, makes you irrational. A part of me knew that staying in that room was a death sentence, but another part, some dark, terrified corner of my brain, told me that if I moved even an inch, it would know, that it was waiting for me to make the first move. Then I heard it, a whisper, so faint it was almost swallowed by the silence. "Jess, come here. I found something for you." My blood turned to ice. It was Ethan's voice, or at least something trying to sound like him. But it wasn't just the words that made my skin crawl. It was the way he said them. Flat, hollow, like someone who had learned how to speak by watching people through a window. And then, from just outside the door, tap, tap, tap. I needed to move. Now, without thinking, I grabbed my phone off the nightstand, shoved it into my pocket, and bolted for the door. I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I saw what was behind that door, I knew I'd never get out. I sprinted down the hallway, my socks skidding on the hardwood floor, and tore down the stairs. The house felt wrong, like it wasn't mine anymore, like the walls were watching me, closing in. When I reached the front door, I yanked it open and stumbled out into the cold night air. The sky was a dull grey, and the wind howled through the trees, making the branches scratch against the windows like fingers trying to get in. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. I threw open the door, jumped inside, and locked it behind me. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I slammed the gear into reverse, peeling out of the driveway without looking back. I drove for hours, aimless and panicked, the roads blurring together in my mind. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to get away. Every time I checked the rearview mirror, I half expected to see Ethan sitting in the back seat, smiling that awful empty smile. Eventually, I ended up in a gas station parking lot, miles from home. I parked under a flickering streetlight trying to catch my breath. The weight of exhaustion hit me all at once, making my limbs heavy and useless, but I couldn't sleep, not yet. I pulled out my phone, hoping for a message from Lily or Ben, something to ground me, but instead, I saw something that made my heart stop cold. I had a new notification. It was a photo. With trembling hands, I opened it. The picture was of me, sitting in my car, exactly where I was now, under that same flickering streetlight, eyes wide and terrified. And in the back seat, just barely visible in the shadows, was Ethan's smile. I dropped the phone like it burned me, heart racing so hard it hurt. I twisted in my seat, glancing over my shoulder. Nothing. The back seat was empty, but that didn't matter, did it? If it wanted me to know it was there, it would show itself. I was never going to escape it. I don't know how long I sat there, staring out into the dark, mind spinning in 1,000 different directions. My phone buzzed again, pulling me back to reality. I didn't want to look, but I knew I had to. Another message, just 4 words this time. "It's already too late." I dropped the phone in my lap, chest heaving. I was out of options. There was no running from this thing. It wasn't just following me, it was inside me now, twisting through my thoughts, planting seeds of paranoia and fear that I couldn't rip out. And then, as I sat there in the darkness, I realized the truth. The Ouija board hadn't been warning me about Ethan. Not really. It was warning me about something far worse. Myself. Because the moment I asked that question, "What do you know about Ethan?" I had invited it in. The Watcher. It wasn't just following Ethan. It had chosen me. And no matter how far I ran, no matter how many doors I locked, it was going to find me. It always does. I don't know what's going to happen next. Maybe I'll keep running until it catches up with me. Maybe I'll disappear, like the others from that cursed thread. Or maybe, just maybe, I'll stop running. Because I'm starting to think that's what it wants. It's not the chase that excites it. It's the moment you give in. The moment you let it in. And as I sit here, staring at the reflection in the rearview mirror, I see something that makes my heart stop cold. I'm smiling, and it's not my smile. The Ouija board gave us a date. Something horrible is going to happen tomorrow. Part 1. A stupid idea. All right, so before anyone calls me an idiot, which, let's be real, I kinda deserve, let me just say, I know it was dumb. I know the whole let's mess with a Ouija board thing is right up there with let's split up in a haunted house, as far as horror movie cliches go. But the thing is, it wasn't even my idea, okay? It was my roommate Sam's, and I guess it sounded fun at the time, like a dumb little joke. Spoiler, it wasn't. This all went down 3 nights ago. I live with 3 other people in this crappy off-campus house. There's me, Sam, Kelsey, and Ethan. None of us are really the dark and spooky type. Sam's the kind of guy who thinks Bloody Mary is just a cocktail. Kelsey is your typical true crime junkie who listens to podcasts 24/7. And Ethan, well, Ethan is basically a human golden retriever. He's always down for whatever, no questions asked. So when Sam found this old Ouija board in the back of a thrift store and brought it home, I figured, what's the worst that could happen? In hindsight, that was such a bad question to ask. It was around midnight when we decided to use it, because of course, right? Midnight. Classic. Ethan had just come back from a party and was already 3 beers in. Sam was hyped. Kelsey had her phone out ready to record, and I was sitting there thinking about how weirdly heavy the air felt. Like, it was one of those nights where everything feels just a little off. But I didn't want to be the buzzkill, so I sat down with them. We set the board on the coffee table in the living room, and Sam started acting like he was a professional ghost hunter or something. "All right, everybody," he said, doing his best spooky voice. "Who's ready to talk to the other side?" Ethan laughed way too hard, and Kelsey rolled her eyes, but she was already filming on her phone. I almost bailed right then and there, but again, I didn't want to be that guy. So we put our fingers on the planchette, and Sam started asking the usual dumb questions. You know, the typical, "Is there anyone here with us?" and "What's your name?" stuff. At first, nothing happened. Just us, sitting in awkward silence while Ethan tried not to burp beer fumes in my face. But then the planchette started to move. At first, I thought Sam was messing with us. It wasn't fast. It was this slow, shaky glide, like someone wasn't sure how to spell something. Kelsey whispered, "Holy crap," under her breath, and Ethan let out this nervous laugh, like he didn't quite believe what he was seeing. The thing is, I was watching Sam's hands, and I swear to you, they didn't move. He wasn't pushing it. Neither was anyone else. The planchette slid to the letters. O M O R R O W. "Tomorrow?" Kelsey whispered. I could tell she was loving this. I mean, she listens to stuff like The Morbid Files every day for fun, so a little weird Ouija action was probably the highlight of her week. Ethan gave Sam a playful shove. "Dude, stop messing with us," he said. But Sam looked genuinely confused. "It's not me, man," Sam said, his voice lower now. "I swear." I felt a chill run down my spine, but I still told myself it was probably just one of them messing around. You know, mind games. Someone's always secretly moving the planchette in these things, right? It's just how they work. But then, out of nowhere, the planchette moved again. Faster this time. Kelsey gasped, and Ethan actually jumped. It spelled out D.E. A.T. We all kind of stared at each other for a second, waiting for someone to admit it was a joke. But no one did. And then, because Sam is Sam, he laughed, like a weird, nervous laugh, and said, "Oh man, this thing is trying to scare us. Come on, that's so basic. Death, try harder." I wanted to stop right there. I felt like the air in the room had dropped 10 degrees, and I swear I could hear a faint humming sound. almost like a distant radio signal or something. But I told myself I was imagining it. I mean, it's a Ouija board. It's not like it means anything, right? And then the planchette moved again, slowly dragging itself across the board. This time, it spelled out October 14th. We all stared at the board, the room dead silent, except for the sound of Kelsey's phone buzzing with some Instagram notification she ignored. "What the hell is that?" Ethan asked, squinting at the board like it would somehow explain itself. Sam shrugged. "A date, maybe. October 14th. Kelsey checked her phone. "That's tomorrow," she said quietly. I felt a weird flutter of anxiety in my chest. "So what? Tomorrow's the day we die or something?" I joked, trying to make light of it. But no one laughed. The planchette slid to YES, and that's when Ethan freaked out. "All right, nope, I'm out," he said, pushing back from the table like the thing was about to bite him. "This isn't funny anymore." Kelsey stopped recording, but I could see the excited glint in her eyes. Sam tried to laugh it off again, but it sounded forced this time. "Okay, yeah, this is getting a little creepy," he admitted. "Let's just stop." So we said goodbye, just like you're supposed to. Moved the planchette to goodbye, packed up the board, and shoved it back into the box. That should have been the end of it, right? But as soon as we put the board away, my phone buzzed. A notification popped up on the screen, just some random spam email. But here's the thing. The subject line read, "Reminder, your event on October 14th. I stared at my phone for a second, trying to process what I was seeing. My heart skipped a beat. It was just one of those automated calendar notifications, the kind you get when you accidentally RSVP to something stupid. But here's the thing. I didn't RSVP to anything. I opened the email, and it didn't give any details. Just the subject. Reminder, your event on October 14th. No sender, no message body. Just that. "Hey, you guys ever get a calendar reminder you didn't set?" I asked, holding up my phone. Kelsey leaned in to look. "That's weird," she muttered. "What event?" "I don't know," I said. "It doesn't say." Ethan was already standing by the door, pulling his hoodie over his head. "I don't like this, dude. I don't know who's messing with us, but it's not funny." He pointed at Sam. "Swear to God, if this is you, man." "It's not," Sam said, hands raised like he was under arrest. "I don't even know how I'd set something like that up. I'm not a hacker, dude." Kelsey, of course, couldn't resist. "Maybe it's the spirits," she whispered dramatically, wiggling her fingers at Ethan. He flipped her off, but he was clearly rattled. We all were. But after a few minutes of awkward tension, Sam cracked open another beer, and things went back to normal. Or at least, almost normal. Ethan left for bed, muttering something about never trusting us with a Ouija board again, and Kelsey called it a night too. I sat on the couch for a while, scrolling my phone, trying to convince myself that it was all just a coincidence. That's the thing about weird stuff. You can always rationalize it if you try hard enough. Some glitchy email, a little Ouija board prank, maybe Ethan or Sam setting up the date as a joke. It's all explainable, right? But then something happened that I couldn't explain. Part 2. The first sign. It was around 3 a.m. when I woke up to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's a shared house, idiot. People walk around at night. Yeah, I thought the same thing at first. But these footsteps, they weren't normal. They were slow, deliberate, heavy. It was almost like someone was pacing right outside my bedroom door, back and forth. Back and forth. I sat up in bed, heart pounding in my chest, and stared at the door. I kept expecting to hear Ethan stumbling to the bathroom, but it never happened. The footsteps just kept going, and then, as quietly as I could, I got up and opened the door. The hallway was empty, no one there, but the weird part. The air in the hallway was freezing, like way colder than it should have been. It felt like someone had left a window open, but all the windows in the house were shut. I stood there for a second, listening, but everything was dead silent. No footsteps, no wind, just nothing. I went back to bed, trying to shake the uneasy feeling crawling under my skin. I told myself it was just my imagination, that maybe one of the others had been walking around and I just missed them. But as I lay there, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't stop thinking about the board. And that date. 10 Tedi. Part 3. Strange Glitches. The next morning, everything felt off. It wasn't anything huge, just little things. Sam was uncharacteristically quiet, nursing his coffee with a blank stare like he hadn't slept all night. Kelsey, who's usually glued to her phone, kept checking it and frowning like something was bothering her. And Ethan, well, Ethan was Ethan, but even he seemed a little jumpy. We tried to go about our day like normal, but weird stuff kept happening. My phone kept glitching, freezing, restarting on its own, notifications popping up for apps I hadn't opened in months. At one point, I got a text from a random number that just said, "Are you ready?" I deleted it without responding, because what else was I supposed to do? I told myself it was a prank. It had to be. Then Kelsey's phone started acting weird too. She showed me a screenshot of her calendar app, completely blank, except for one single event listed on October 14th. It begins. She swore she didn't put it there, and I believed her. Sam tried to brush it all off, saying it was probably some kind of glitch, maybe a bad update or something. But even he didn't sound convinced. Ethan told us all to chill out, but even he refused to touch his phone the rest of the day. By the time the sun went down, I could tell we were all on edge. We didn't talk about the board. We just tried to act like everything was normal. But it wasn't. Something was coming. I could feel it. Part 4. October 13th, midnight. That night, we all decided to sleep in the living room. None of us admitted we were scared, but no one wanted to be alone either. So we dragged our blankets and pillows downstairs and crashed on the couches. Sam joked that it was like a weird little slumber party, but no one laughed. The air felt heavy again, just like it did the night we used the board. I couldn't stop glancing at the clock on the wall, watching the minutes tick closer to midnight. 11:58, 11:59, 12:00. We all kind of held our breath, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. No creepy noises, no flickering lights, no mysterious texts, just silence. And for a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, we had imagined the whole thing. Maybe it really was just some dumb prank. Maybe tomorrow would come and go, and we'd all laugh about how freaked out we were. But then Kelsey's phone buzzed. She picked it up, and her face went pale. "What the hell?" she whispered. "What?" Sam asked. She turned the screen toward us. It was a notification from her weather app. It read, "Warning, prepare for October 14th. And then the power went out. Part 5. Tomorrow is here. The house plunged into darkness. Ethan cursed, stumbling around for his phone flashlight. I pulled mine out too, but the battery was dead, even though I'd just charged it an hour ago. Okay, it's just a power outage, Sam said, his voice shaky. No big deal. But it was a big deal. Because just then, we heard it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, and heavy, just like the night before. Except this time, they were coming down the stairs, and we weren't alone anymore. The Ouija board gave us a password to an elite dark web forum. Now they're after us. Okay, I know how this is going to sound, but bear with me because I swear this really happened. I'm not usually one to post stuff like this. Hell, I don't even believe in half the paranormal nonsense I see online. But what happened to me and my friends the past few months feels like some kind of fever dream I can't wake up from. I need to get this off my chest. Maybe someone out there has an explanation. Maybe someone else has gone through this too. I don't know. But here's how it all started. So, a few months back, me and two of my closest friends, Andy and Sarah, were hanging out at Sarah's place. She's the type who's always down for some creepy paranormal stuff. Those people who never miss a chance to pull out a Ouija board at 3 a.m. for a laugh. You know the type. Andy and I, not so much. I've always thought the whole Ouija thing was a gimmick. A cheap thrill at best. But that night, we were bored and, well, curiosity got the better of us. We sat in a circle on her living room floor with nothing but the glow of her LED strips along the walls. Sarah insisted on turning off all the lights to set the vibe, of course. The Ouija board looked kind of beat up and old. She'd apparently found it at a thrift shop, which should have been a red flag. But hey, it's just cardboard and plastic, right? Or so I thought. We put our hands on the planchette and started asking the usual questions. Is anyone here? What's your name? You know, the basics. At first, nothing happened. Just awkward silence, and I was ready to call it quits, but Sarah was determined. Then, just as Andy was about to make a snarky comment, the damn thing moved. I swear to God, I barely felt any pressure from their fingers, and mine were hardly touching it. We all froze. The planchette slid, slow and deliberate, to the word yes. Now, normally, this is where things get creepy for about 10 minutes before everyone laughs it off. But this wasn't like those stories. Sarah, who usually plays it cool with this stuff, suddenly went pale. She wasn't giggling or trying to spook us. Her voice was shaky when she asked the next question. What do you want? The planchette shot toward THIS. We looked at each other, confused. This? What was it trying to say? Sarah shrugged, then tried to ask it something more specific. What is this? And then, the thing did something I'll never forget. It started spelling out a string of letters and numbers. Fast, way faster than seemed possible. It was like whatever was moving, it didn't want us to stop halfway. By the time the planchette stopped, we had a full line of random characters in front of us. Something like R7G6A0P9D2Q1GZs. Andy, being the techie of the group, immediately pulled out his phone and Googled it. Nothing. Not a single result. We sat there, staring at the board, trying to figure out what it meant. Sarah asked the board again, "What does this mean?" But the planchette stayed dead still. The energy shifted, and we all felt it. It was like whatever was on the other side had said what it needed to say and was done with us. After a few minutes of awkward silence, Andy, who always jokes when things get tense, said, "Maybe it's a dark web password or something." We all laughed nervously, but I swear I could feel the air get heavier in the room. Sarah looked freaked out, but I could tell she didn't want to admit it. "We're done with this," she said, and shoved the board under her couch. We tried to move on, but the whole thing stuck with me. Those letters and numbers spinning in my head like a glitch you can't shake. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. Not by a long shot. After we left Sarah's place, I couldn't stop thinking about what Andy said. A dark web password. It was a joke, obviously, but something about it gnawed at me. For the next few days, I kept seeing that string of characters in my mind, over and over. And the weird thing? Every time I thought about it, it felt important. Like it was a puzzle I needed to solve, even though I had no clue what it could possibly mean. I told myself it was just leftover adrenaline from that night messing with my head, but it didn't go away. A week passed. I was up late one night, doom-scrolling Reddit, when I got this stupid idea. I was bored, okay? And I'm not proud of what I did next, but I downloaded Tor and hopped onto the dark web. I wasn't planning on actually doing anything sketchy. I just wanted to see if I could find anything weird. In the back of my mind, I kept hearing Andy's voice. What if it's a password? Now, I don't know if you've ever been on the dark web, but it's not as glamorous as people make it sound. Half the links don't work, and the ones that do are just depressing. People selling stolen credit cards, hacked accounts, weird services you don't want to know about. But after clicking around aimlessly for a bit, I found this one site that stood out from the others. It was called The Oracle. No flashy intro page, just a black screen with a login box. Nothing else. On a whim, I typed the string from the Ouija board into the password field. The screen flashed for a second, and just like that, I was in. I wish I could tell you what I saw next was underwhelming, that it was just another dumb scam site with fake mysteries and clickbait junk. But the truth is, what I saw made my stomach drop. The Oracle wasn't just a regular dark website, it was some kind of forum, except every post was encrypted in code that looked like gibberish. There were no usernames or profile pictures, just timestamps and message threads labeled with strange symbols. It felt wrong, like this place wasn't meant to be found by accident. I clicked into one of the threads, hoping to find something that would make it all make sense. But as soon as I did, my screen glitched. For half a second, the browser window froze, and then a message popped up across the screen in plain English. "Welcome. We've been expecting you." I slammed my laptop shut. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I don't know what I was expecting, but it sure as hell wasn't that. I sat there in the dark for a few minutes, just staring at the closed laptop. And then my phone buzzed. I picked it up, hands shaking. It was a text from an unknown number. The message was short, but it made my blood run cold. "You shouldn't have done that." I tried to convince myself it was a coincidence. Maybe someone hacked my phone. Maybe it was just Andy playing a prank. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I thought about calling Sarah or Andy, but I didn't. What was I going to say? "Hey guys, remember that Ouija board session? Well, now I think I've stumbled into a secret dark web cult and they're texting me creepy messages." Yeah, no thanks. I forced myself to go to bed that night, but sleep didn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing that message. "Welcome. We've been expecting you." And something told me that wasn't a lie. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing again. For a second I hoped it was Andy or Sarah. But when I looked at the screen, it was another message from the same unknown number. This time, it wasn't just text. There was an image attached. I opened it without thinking, and what I saw made my stomach twist. It was a photo of my apartment building, taken from the street. The timestamp was from 3 hours ago, around 3 a.m. I sat up so fast, I almost knocked my phone out of my hand. My chest felt tight, like I'd just run a marathon without warming up. I tried to convince myself it was some random person messing with me, but how would they know where I lived? I hadn't told anyone about visiting the Oracle. In fact, I'd wiped my browsing history and deleted Tor right after closing my laptop, hoping to forget the whole thing. But clearly, they hadn't forgotten about me. I jumped out of bed, rushed to my window, and pulled the curtain back. The street outside looked normal, empty, except for a couple of parked cars. No sign of anyone lurking nearby. But the uneasy feeling stuck with me, like a shadow that I couldn't shake. Before I could think too hard about what to do next, my phone buzzed again. Another message from the same number. "You have 24 hours to complete your task. Check your inbox for instructions." A new email notification appeared immediately after. I hesitated for a moment, fingers trembling, but I couldn't not open it. The subject line just said, "Rules for participation." The email itself was a short, cryptic list. "You do not speak of the Oracle. You must complete the task given to you within 24 hours. Failure to comply will result in removal. There is no way out. You've already been marked." At the bottom of the email, there was one more line, bolded. "Do not involve the authorities. We'll know." Below that, attached to the email, was a text file labeled task001.txt. I didn't want to open it. Every nerve in my body told me to delete the email, throw my phone into a river, and act like none of this was happening. But the problem was, I'd already opened it. I'd read the rules. I had 24 hours, and something told me that whoever, or whatever, these people were, they weren't bluffing. With my heart racing, I opened the text file. The task was oddly simple. All it said was, leave an unmarked package in the bathroom of the Silver Lake Diner by 5 p.m. Do not open it. Do not speak to anyone. That was it. No further instructions. No explanation of what the package was, or how I was supposed to get it in the first place. Just the task, written like it was routine. At first, I thought, okay, this is doable. They probably just want me to drop off some drugs or something weird. I don't even need to know what's inside. But the longer I stared at the screen, the worse I felt. This wasn't some ordinary job. I could feel it in my bones. And then the doorbell rang. I nearly jumped out of my skin. It was like they knew exactly when I'd read the email. I crept toward the door and peered through the peephole. There was no one outside, just a small, nondescript cardboard box sitting on my doormat. No label, no address, just a plain box, taped shut. My stomach churned as I opened the door and grabbed it. The package was heavier than I expected, and I swear I could feel something shift inside as I carried it inside. The weight made it feel alive almost, like there was something fragile inside, waiting to break if I wasn't careful. For a brief moment, I considered opening it, just to see what was inside. But the warning from the email flashed through my mind. Do not open it. I couldn't afford to make a mistake. I spent the next few hours pacing my apartment, trying to figure out my next move. I wanted to call Andy or Sarah, but how could I explain any of this without sounding insane? I kept glancing at the box, sitting there on my kitchen table like a bomb waiting to go off. By 4 p.m., I knew I didn't have a choice. If I didn't do what they said, I'd find out what removal meant, and I had no intention of finding out the hard way. I grabbed the box, threw on a hoodie, and headed out the door. The Silver Lake Diner was about a 20-minute drive from my place. It was one of those old-school diners with neon signs buzzing outside, the kind of place that always smelled like coffee and stale fries. I'd been there a couple of times before, but tonight, it felt different. Like it wasn't just a place to grab food. It was part of something bigger, something dangerous. I pulled into the parking lot and checked the time. 4:45 p.m. 15 minutes to get this over with. The diner wasn't crowded, just a couple of customers at the booths, chatting quietly over their food. I kept my head down as I walked in, the box tucked under my arm. No one seemed to notice me, but I felt eyes on me anyway, like someone knew exactly why I was there. The bathroom was at the back, past the kitchen doors. I made a beeline for it, heart pounding the whole way. Inside, the bathroom was dimly lit and empty, except for the hum of the fluorescent lights. I stepped into one of the stalls, set the box down on the floor, and backed away like it was a ticking time bomb. Just leave it and go, I told myself. Don't think about it. Just leave it and go. But as I reached for the door, I heard something. A faint scratching sound. It was coming from the box. I froze. My hand hovered over the doorknob, but I couldn't bring myself to leave. The scratching was soft at first, like something small trying to claw its way out. And then it got louder, more frantic. What the hell is in that box? I wanted to walk away. I should have walked away. But something about the sound rooted me in place. It didn't sound normal. It wasn't the scratching of an animal. It was too deliberate, too human. And then it stopped. For a moment, everything was silent. Just the hum of the lights and my own breathing, ragged and shallow. And then, just as I turned to leave, I heard it. A whisper from inside the box. It was faint, but I swear I heard it clear as day. Help me. I ran. I didn't care what the rules were anymore. I didn't care what they would do to me for breaking them. Whatever was in that box, whoever was in that box, wasn't something I wanted to understand. I bolted out of the bathroom, out of the diner, and back into my car without looking back. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely get the keys into the ignition. As I peeled out of the parking lot, I glanced at the clock on the dashboard. 4:59 p.m. I'd left the box just in time. But as I drove away, one thought kept circling in my mind, over and over. Who or what had I just left behind? And what would happen now that I hadn't followed the rules? The drive home was a blur. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, heart hammering so loud I could barely think. The whisper from the box echoed in my head, like a song I couldn't shake. Help me. I kept telling myself I'd done the right thing by leaving it there. Whatever that was, it wasn't my problem. But it didn't feel right. Nothing about it felt right. By the time I pulled into my apartment parking lot, the sun was just starting to set, casting a deep orange glow over the buildings. For a second, I let myself believe it was over. I dropped the box, left it where they told me to, and made it out in time. Maybe, just maybe, I'd get a pass for running. But as I parked, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. There was a car idling a few spaces away, one I hadn't seen before. It was an old black sedan with windows tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. I sat there for a minute, waiting for whoever was inside to get out or drive away. But the car didn't move. It just sat there, engine humming quietly. A warning went off in my head. Don't get out. But I didn't have a choice. My phone was buzzing again, vibrating non-stop in my pocket. I needed to get inside, lock the doors, and figure out what the hell was going on. I bolted out of the car and sprinted to my building, refusing to look back. As soon as I got inside my apartment, I slammed the door behind me and locked it. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like my ribs might crack. I pulled out my phone and saw I had a new message, another unknown number. The message was just a single word. Run. I almost dropped my phone. Run. Run from what? I glanced toward the window, half expecting to see someone standing outside. The black sedan was still in the parking lot, and then my phone buzzed again. This time, it was an email. Same subject line as before. Task 001 status, incomplete. I opened it, hoping, praying. It would tell me everything was fine. Maybe I got off on a technicality. Maybe the box still counted as delivered, even though I'd run. But the email was short. No threats, no explanation, just one line. You left before it finished. Finished what? I thought about the scratching sounds, the whisper. Help me. Had I left something or someone trapped? My hands were shaking as I scrolled down to the bottom of the email. There was an attachment, just like before, a new text file labeled consequences.txt. I tapped it, and as soon as it opened, my heart stopped. The first line was my full name. Not just my first name, everything. Middle name, too. Beneath that was my address, my phone number. And then at the very bottom, a timestamp, 5 a.m. That was in a little over 10 hours. I sat there staring at the screen, paralyzed with fear. The message was clear. Something was coming for me at 5 a.m. And I had no idea what it was. I tried to think logically. I could call Andy or Sarah, but what would I even tell them? I couldn't exactly say, hey, remember that Ouija board thing? Yeah, well, now I'm being hunted by people from the dark web because I botched a weird task involving a haunted box. I needed a plan. Something that didn't involve dragging anyone else into this mess. I glanced at the clock on my phone. 6:55 p.m. Time was ticking, and I had no clue what would happen if I was still in my apartment when 5 a.m. rolled around. That's when I made the dumbest decision of my life. I decided to go back to the diner. The drive back felt even longer than before. Every car that passed me felt like a threat. Every red light felt like a trap. My mind kept racing with the same questions over and over. What was in the box? Why had it whispered to me? And most importantly, what happens if I don't fix this? When I pulled into the diner's parking lot, it was almost empty. Just a couple of cars, including the same black sedan from earlier. It was parked right in front of the diner now, its engine still running. I forced myself out of the car and walked toward the diner, heart thundering in my chest. The windows were fogged up from the inside, and the neon sign buzzed overhead, flickering every few seconds like it was on its last legs. The moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. The air felt heavy, like the atmosphere before a storm. There were only two other customers. A man in a trucker hat slumped over a plate of cold fries and a waitress behind the counter, scrolling through her phone. Neither of them looked up when I walked in. I headed straight for the bathroom, trying to ignore the knot forming in my stomach. When I opened the bathroom door, the box was still there, right where I'd left it, sitting in the middle of the stall like it had been waiting for me. Except now, it was open. The top flaps were peeled back, but whatever had been inside was gone. All that remained was a folded piece of paper sitting at the bottom of the empty box. I picked it up, hands trembling, and unfolded it. There were only 4 words scrawled across the paper in messy handwriting. They let it out. I felt like I was going to throw up. I stumbled back, my head spinning. Whatever had been inside that box, it wasn't there anymore. And somehow I knew it was coming for me. I rushed out of the bathroom and back into the diner. But as soon as I stepped into the main area, the lights flickered. The air grew colder, and everything went silent. Too silent. Even the hum of the neon sign outside cut out. The waitress was no longer behind the counter. The guy with the trucker hat, gone. It was like the entire diner had emptied out in the span of a few seconds. I turned toward the front door, ready to bolt, get out, get to my car, drive until I ran out of gas. But the black sedan was parked right outside, and this time, the driver's door was open. A man stood just outside the car, staring directly at me through the diner window. He was tall and thin, dressed in a black suit that looked a little too tight, like it was stitched onto his skin. His face was pale and stretched, almost cartoonishly long, with sunken eyes that didn't seem to blink. And then, without moving his lips, I heard him speak. "It's too late." The lights flickered again, and for a moment, everything went dark. I swear I felt something brush past me in the blackness, cold fingers trailing against my arm. I stumbled backward, heart pounding, and when the lights came back on, the man in the suit was gone, and the only thing left was a single word, scratched deep into the glass of the diner window. Marked. I didn't wait to find out what that meant. I sprinted to my car and peeled out of the parking lot, tires screeching against the pavement. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely keep the wheels steady. The clock on the dashboard blinked. 12:13 a.m. Less than 5 hours until 5 a.m. And somehow I knew I wouldn't make it that long. I didn't go home. There was no point. Whatever was happening, whatever was chasing me, it already knew where I lived. Driving aimlessly through the city seemed like the only option. Maybe if I kept moving, I could buy myself some time. I just needed to make it to 5 a.m. without whatever was coming for me finding me first. But deep down, I knew that was wishful thinking. The black sedan had been at the diner for a reason. That man in the suit, if you can even call him that, wasn't just a warning. He was part of it. I could feel it in my bones, the way a person knows a storm is coming before they see the first flash of lightning. The air around me felt charged, heavy. Something was out there, and it was getting closer. The city streets looked unfamiliar, even though I'd driven them 1,000 times before. The streetlights buzzed overhead, casting pools of sickly yellow light onto the wet pavement, but each one seemed to flicker just as I drove beneath it, as if the lights were watching me. It was 1:42 a.m. when my phone buzzed again. Another message from the same unknown number. "Where do you think you're going?" My hands tightened on the wheel. My breathing felt shallow, chest tightening with panic. They knew I was running. They were watching me, tracking me somehow. It didn't matter how far I drove. There's no way out. I tried to swallow the panic rising in my throat. I needed to think. I needed to figure out my next move before they caught up to me. But as soon as I started to calm down, I saw it in my rearview mirror. Headlights, a pair of them, far off in the distance but gaining on me fast. The car was moving too smoothly, too steadily. Even from a distance, I knew. It was the black sedan. I floored it. The streets blurred past me in a haze of neon signs and flickering traffic lights. I swerved through intersections, tires screeching against the pavement. The sedan stayed with me the whole time, its headlights glowing in the rearview mirror like eyes, unblinking and predatory. And then the worst part. It didn't speed up. It didn't need to. It just followed me, smooth and steady, like it knew exactly where I was going before I did. It wasn't chasing me. It was herding me. At 2:05 a.m., I pulled onto an old highway on the outskirts of town. It was the kind of road that rarely got traffic, lined with dense trees and the occasional flickering lamppost. I thought I'd lose them here. There were no cameras, no lights, just darkness all around me. But the sedan stayed on my tail, never more than 100 yards behind. And then, as I rounded a bend, I saw something strange up ahead. A single figure, standing in the middle of the road. I slammed on the brakes, the tires screeched, and my car skidded to a stop just a few feet away from them. My heart was pounding so hard, it felt like it might crack my ribs. It was a woman, barefoot, dressed in what looked like a thin hospital gown. Her hair hung in damp, tangled clumps over her face, and her arms dangled limply at her sides. She stood perfectly still like a mannequin. I couldn't see her eyes through the curtain of hair, but somehow I knew she was looking right at me, and then she tilted her head, slowly, almost mechanically, and smiled. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I threw the car into reverse, tires screaming as I backed away from her, but as soon as I looked in the rearview mirror, my blood ran cold. The black sedan was gone. I twisted in my seat, frantically scanning the road behind me, but the sedan had vanished into thin air. It didn't make sense. It had been right there, following me. I saw it, but now, it was like it had never existed at all. And when I turned back toward the road ahead, the woman was standing right in front of my car. I didn't even think. I hit the gas. The tires squealed against the pavement as the car lurched forward, and for a split second, I thought I was about to run her down. But just before I hit her, the woman disappeared. Not like she jumped out of the way. Not like she ran off into the woods. 1 second she was there, inches from my bumper, and the next, gone. Just air and darkness where she'd been standing. I kept driving, heart pounding, trying to tell myself that I'd imagined it. Maybe the stress was messing with my head. Maybe none of this was real. But then my phone buzzed again. That was your last warning. By the time I pulled off the highway, my hands were shaking so bad I could barely grip the wheel. I needed a place to stop, somewhere with lights, with people, somewhere safe. I drove aimlessly for another 20 minutes before spotting an old motel just off the road. The neon sign buzzed weakly, casting a dull red glow over the parking lot, but it was better than nothing. I parked the car and sat there for a moment, gathering what little courage I had left. The night air was thick with silence, and I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching me. I grabbed my phone and checked the time. 3:12 a.m., less than 2 hours left. The motel lobby was empty except for an old man behind the desk, slouched in a plastic chair. He barely glanced at me as I walked in, his eyes glued to a tiny TV playing static in the corner. I paid for a room in cash and didn't bother asking for a receipt. The room smelled like mold and cigarette smoke, but it had a lock on the door, and that was all I cared about. I shoved a chair under the doorknob for good measure and collapsed onto the bed, my whole body trembling with exhaustion and fear. For a moment, I let myself believe that I'd made it. I was off the road, out of sight. I had less than 2 hours left. If I could just hold out until 5 a.m., maybe, this would all be over. But then the lights in the room flickered. At first, it was just a brief pulse, like a surge of power. But then, it happened again, and again. The overhead light buzzed violently, flickering faster and faster until it cut out completely, plunging the room into total darkness. And that's when I saw them. Eyes. Hundreds of them, glowing faintly in the dark, scattered across the walls and ceiling like stars. They blinked slowly, all of them focused on me, watching, waiting. My breath hitched in my throat, and I scrambled off the bed, backing into the corner of the room. The eyes followed my every move, unblinking and predatory. And then, from somewhere deep in the dark, I heard it, a whisper. "We see you." My phone buzzed one last time. I didn't need to check it to know what it said. 5 a.m. was too late. I didn't dare move. The glowing eyes pinned me to the corner of the room, each one blinking slowly, deliberately, like they were studying me. I tried to convince myself it was some kind of hallucination, a trick of the dark. But deep down, I knew. This was real. The whisper from the darkness grew louder, overlapping voices that crawled under my skin and set every nerve on fire. "We see you." Then something shifted. The eyes moved. Closer. I scrambled backward, but there was nowhere to go. My back hit the cold wall, and I pressed myself against it, trying to make myself as small as possible. The room felt alive with their presence, the air thick and suffocating. And then, in the silence, I heard it. A slow, deliberate knock on the motel door. Knock, knock, knock. 3 knocks. The sound was dull and heavy, like someone rapping on the door with their knuckles. The kind of knock that doesn't come from someone looking for a friendly chat. I froze. My brain screamed at me not to answer it, but my body refused to move. I stared at the door, heart slamming against my ribs, praying it would stop. It didn't. Knock, knock, knock. The whispering grew louder, the voices swirling around me. The eyes blinked in unison now, their glowing gaze shifting toward the door as if waiting for me to answer. I clenched my fists, trying to think. Maybe if I ignored it, whoever was out there would leave. But then the doorknob rattled. It turned slowly, the lock clicking once, twice. But the chair I had jammed under the knob held, for now. Whoever was outside tested the handle a few more times, patient, almost playful, as if they already knew I wouldn't open it. And then, from the other side of the door, I heard the same voice I'd heard back at the diner, the man in the black suit. It's time. I could feel the blood drain from my face. He was here. He'd followed me, just like the rules warned. I tried to hold my breath, but I was shaking so badly that I could hear my own pulse pounding in my ears. And then, just as suddenly as it started, the knocking stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the knocks. It stretched on for what felt like an eternity, thick and heavy, pressing down on my chest. The whispers in the room quieted, as if whatever was watching me knew the end was near. And then my phone buzzed one last time. I pulled it from my pocket, hands trembling so hard I could barely hold it. The message was short, just 2 words. Look behind. My stomach dropped. Every instinct in my body screamed not to turn around, not to move, not to do anything. But something stronger, something beyond fear, forced me to obey. Slowly, painfully, I turned my head toward the corner of the room. There, crouched in the shadows, was a figure. It was small, folded in on itself like it didn't belong in a human shape. Its skin was grey and stretched tight over sharp bones, and its eyes, those same glowing eyes, blinked at me from hollow sockets. Its mouth twisted into a grin too wide for its face, showing rows of small, jagged teeth. And then it whispered, "Help me." The same words I'd heard from the box. I gasped, stumbling back toward the door. My hand fumbled with the chair blocking it, but the figure moved faster. It slithered across the floor with inhuman grace, dragging its limbs like dead weight. The sound of it, flesh scraping against the tiles, was enough to make my skin crawl. Before I could scream, it was on me. Cold hands clamped around my wrists, impossibly strong, and its face, if you could call it that, pressed inches from mine. The grin widened, and the smell of rot and damp earth filled my lungs. "You let me out," it whispered, the words sliding off its tongue like oil. "Now you belong to us." The room spun. I fought against its grip, but it was like trying to wrestle with a nightmare, impossible to escape. The voices from the dark filled my ears, louder now, chanting in some language I couldn't understand. I felt myself slipping, the walls of reality breaking apart like thin glass. And then, just as the darkness began to swallow me whole, everything stopped. I opened my eyes. Or maybe I was dreaming. It was hard to tell. I was no longer in the motel room. The walls, the bed, the flickering lights. They were gone. I was standing in a vast, empty space. Endless darkness stretched in every direction, and the only thing I could see was a figure standing a few feet away. The man in the black suit. He smiled, an expression that didn't reach his cold, dead eyes. "You ran when you shouldn't have," he said calmly, like a teacher scolding a student. "You broke the rules." I tried to speak, to ask him what he wanted from me, but the words wouldn't come. My throat felt tight, like something was coiled around it. The man's smile widened. "There are consequences for breaking the rules. And now..." He took a step closer, his pale face filling my vision. "You're marked forever." And then I was back. The motel room snapped into focus, the lights flickering weakly overhead. The figure in the corner was gone. The whispers had stopped. It was just me, standing alone in the middle of the room, gasping for air. I thought for a moment that it was over, that I'd been spared. But then I felt it, the weight of something cold and invisible pressing down on me. And when I looked in the bathroom mirror, I saw it. A small black mark etched into the skin just beneath my left eye. A perfect circle, no bigger than a dime. I scrubbed at it, desperate to make it disappear, but it didn't fade. It was under my skin, part of me now, marked. And then my phone buzzed one final time. The message was simple: "Welcome to the other side." It's been a week since that night. I haven't told Andy or Sarah what happened. I haven't told anyone. There's no point. The mark beneath my eye hasn't faded, and every now and then I catch glimpses of those glowing eyes in reflections, watching me from mirrors, from windows, from the dark corners of my apartment. I don't know what happens next. I don't know what I let out of that box, or why it chose me. But one thing is clear: there's no escaping this. The rules weren't just warnings, they were promises. And now, I belong to them. The black sedan shows up outside my apartment every night at 3 a.m, engine running, waiting. I don't answer the door anymore. I know better now, but they're patient. They know I'll have to come out eventually. And when I do, they'll be waiting. Because once you've been marked, there's no way out. Only a matter of time.